Welcome to Leap Listens. I'm Sarah McGregor.
And I'm Roger Kalis.
And Leap Listens is brought to you by Leap Create. We are a people communications agency, and we work with organisations to help communicate their culture and to attract and recruit candidates and to engage and retain employees. So this is our roundup, isn't it, Rog?
It is, yeah. So the wrap up of the first series. But we were very lucky, weren't we, with the guests that we had.
Yeah.
And we thought it would probably be interesting if we just went through each one and kind of like what was the thing that we took away from each of them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really good journey, hasn't it, to do this? And we've met some, like you say, some very interesting people. And I'm looking forward to series 2.
Series 2, yeah.
That we'll be starting very soon.
So having talked about, well, what were the key takeaways from each guest? Obviously, the first guests were us.
Yeah, Sarah and Roger. Dream team.
The dream team. Yeah. The self-professed dream team.
Yeah.
So I mean, from memory, I'd kind of written a thing about how it's a good time to be a creative in the industry. And you were asking me why. And it was about employer branding moving out of a niche into the mainstream, and how the briefs that we get given around things like talent shortages and diversity and inclusion and equity and social mobility and early careers, they're all things to do with how the world works now in a kind of post-pandemic world. So the point being that these are like societal issues more than just a little advertising niche. And that's what makes it a great place to be in the industry right now.
Absolutely. And what was really interesting about that is the discussions that we had afterwards with various people, various clients in the industry. And that was the topic of conversation a lot, wasn't it? Like is a great time to be in employer branding. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it was a good opener.
It was a good starter. Yes, absolutely. So then we went on to episode 2.
Yeah, that's generally what happens after
Thanks,
one.
Roger.
That's all right.
Stating the obvious, with Caroline Gundu, and she's the lead business consultant at CGI. And we were talking here, really interesting conversation about the confidence gap, particularly when we were a lot more working from home, and it was harder to hear your voice, particularly over things like Teams and Zooms for women. So the key takeaway for us for this one was, confidence is a skill that you can learn. And by asking for support and saying yes to things outside your comfort zone, your confidence will grow.
Absolutely. I think what to me was really good about that, because I think, we all know people of various different confidence, and some people you just think, that's just something people are born with, they're natural performers or they're naturally at that. And I thought the idea of thinking of confidence as a skill rather than something that just, you've got it or you haven't, meant that it's then something that you can learn.
Yeah.
So if you're there telling yourself, well, I'm not, a confident person, I'm not like them, I'm not like this, that's not true. It might be more difficult, but you can actually learn to be confident, and that was the thing I kind of took away from it.
Absolutely, and it is so true. And I, from my own experience as well, that it's practice, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
Just belief. So that was a great episode.
And next up was copywriter and author, written a couple of children's books now. It's Andy Rigdon, and he was talking about the internal tone of voice, which I thought was interesting because obviously most people in marketing or advertising are very familiar with organizations' tone of voice, but not always thinking about how that works internally. How do people communicate inside an organization rather than externally to their customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And it does have a direct link, doesn't it, to morale, retention and culture?
Yeah, absolutely.
There we went on to episode 4 with our friend David.
Yes, our very good friend David. And he was still reeling from Neighbours.
Well, no, it was hashtag save neighbours, but now obviously
that's kind of
that ship has sailed.
That train has left the station.
And hashtag no more neighbours.
No more neighbours.
Let's not dwell on that point, because we know that he's upset about that.
No, he is. Yeah.
So the key takeaway for this one was, stories can change our minds and win our hearts. And that was the topic of conversation. And more importantly, for employer branding campaigns is authentic stories. And that connection with, people to an organisation and how you can engage with them at a deeper level.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone bangs on about stories. The key thing is making sure that those stories are interesting and authentic. And I think for him as well, it was about constantly gathering those diverse stories from across the organisation. And I suppose that led to a conversation about, well, how do you do that? How do you go around gathering those stories? And that was that led to quite an interesting discussion.
Yeah, it's a really, really good episode. That one, very popular as well with the downloads.
Popular with the fans.
Yeah. So episode 5. So this was Arian Baranowski, and he's the head of internal communications at Money Supermarket Group. And during the pandemic, Arian was working for John Lewis and had to deliver some really, really tough news to employees, and a large number of them over Teams. And how this was done and the impact it had on people's lives and how he dealt with that. And he also talked about working from home and how the future of hybrid working and, how companies have to sort of adapt to that for different types of groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he was talking about the importance of those kind of micro conversations and still having those. I mean, and a lot of this now is, I guess, has been said because we're in that post-pandemic world. But at the time that Arian was saying it, he was really just talking about the importance of, wasn't he, empathy and understanding for people, and having those small conversations that you would used to have with people when you were face to face.
Yeah, absolutely. And then going back to having to deliver that news over Teams, and when you're not face to face with someone, how the planning that goes into that, you have to be very strategic.
Yeah, and meticulous.
Yeah.
And then next, obviously, the legend, the visionary that is Susan Lamotte, the CEO and founder of Exacquio. And she's one of the sort of top influences in the employer branding and recruitment marketing space. And what was really fascinating about her was how very much sees the employee relationship as one that works on different levels. So rather than necessarily being just the employer value proposition, this idea of swapping your time and skills for money and benefits, she sees it as a relationship that works on a number of different levels, and that is a kind of a communal relationship.
Yeah,
really, really fascinating.
It was, yeah, and the areas that she talked about, was number one, the relationship with my organisation, like who employs me, the relationship with my leaders, who governs my work, and then the relationship with my co-workers, like who do I work with, and then finally the relationship with my work, like what do I do and how do I do it. So
yeah, and I think what we're finding now, or what certainly is being said, is that with things like the Great Resignation, is that people are coming to realise that, and they're not just necessarily staying for money, and you do need these higher purposes. With people hopping around everywhere, sometimes that's not it's not just a transactional relationship that keeps someone there. There's more to it, which we explored deeply in that episode.
Absolutely, yeah. So then we went on to episode 7, which was Pete Markey, so the CMO of Boots. And you might think he would be only interested in marketing the brand to customers, but actually he talked a lot about how the employees are living the brand and how important that is to the culture, and actually is one of their 4 pillars of success.
There was a couple of lines of his that I've sort of stolen.
I've noticed.
And I almost don't want to say them out loud now because you know that. But this idea that employees are a living manifestation of your brand was a really interesting one, wasn't it? So you go into Boots, and the person that serves you is kind of a manifestation of the brand. And we were talking about, okay, well, how do you get them to buy into those, to the higher purpose? And he went into some real detail into that. But what was interesting was exactly what you said, was him encouraging marketing people to talk to HR people, and vice versa, and don't see yourself living in this bubble of, oh yeah, but that's HR. Really make friends with the HR people, make friends with your employer brand colleagues if you're in marketing, because those two things are totally linked together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny enough, actually, because I did have a conversation with someone last week and was saying exactly the same thing. So thanks to Pete.
You stole some things too.
I did. And then we went on to speak with Rob Ryan, who was working for Serco at the time, and we talked data.
After sort of quite a lot of inevitable moaning about applicant tracking systems and the sort of various, the industry that we know struggles with linking those things together and legacy systems and data. But what I found interesting with him was what he measures, what that means to him, and how you can challenge assumptions with the undeniable truth of data.
Yeah, absolutely. And also what was really interesting is looking at all the different sources of data that's available to you. So that was a very interesting chat.
And then episode 9 was a industry big hitter,
yes,
Mark Corley, who's co-founder of Tonic, and a really interesting chat with him. Quite a provocative title, essentially asking if employer brands exist.
And do they, Roger?
Well, do they? Well, I suppose it came from a similar sort of follow-up to Pete Markey's conversation, really, which is that because this industry borrows so much from, if you like, above the line advertising, to call it that, you sometimes wonder to yourself, well, does it really exist? So, you sell this idea of an employer brand, but unless it's a vocational job like the army or social work or a teacher, if you've got a very well-known product, are you just really associating it with the brand? His thought, which I share, is that really there is employer brands, but it's part of the overall brand, how employees fit into that. So yeah, a fascinating chat with Mark.
Excellent. And then finally, we had episode 10, which was Dr. Anne-Marie Imafidon, MBE. She is the Chief STEMette, an amazing person who supports and motivates girls and young women between the ages of 5 and 25 into science, technology, engineering and maths. And we talked about how to recruit more women into STEM. And she gave some very good practical advice for organizations and talked a lot about networks. And it was a really great episode, wasn't it, to end on?
Yeah, it really was. And I think what was good as well is their STEMettes has been around for 10 years now.
Yes.
And I suppose it was really good at the end to hear her talking about how she's seen the work that they've done now kind of coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And that she often now will turn up at an organization and some of the people who've kind of been touched by STEMettes are now in quite senior positions, so it's sort of testament to the work that they're doing. But it was a really good one. I'd very much urge anyone to listen to that.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. And then that was a wrap, wasn't it? And then now we're moving into series 2, where we've got a number of exciting guests lined up.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about what we could do better. I think we need to make it a bit more conversational.
Yes.
I don't think I'm making enough jokes.
I think we need to have a limit on those, Roger. You can have one every season.
Can we have like one that maybe I've thought of beforehand and one that's sort of on the...
Oh no, definitely not.
Okay.
No.
All right,
I think they have to be pre-approved.
So we've got some good guests already lined up.
Yes.
With an overarching theme around culture.
Absolutely, yeah, which is obviously very important to us. We want to be culture-led employer brand specialists. And yeah, the theme for series 2 will be around culture.
I look forward to the next series.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.